To find brilliance in madness, inspiration in obsession, one must often walk the razor's edge, where creativity and instability intertwine. The line between genius and insanity is often blurred, and intense creative focus can sometimes lead to psychological instability, raising the question of whether extraordinary achievement demands an unbearable price. For millennia, humanity has sought to understand this connection between heightened creativity and what it may cost. Trace the historical understanding of the genius madness, link back to ancient Greece, referencing figures like Aristotle and Plato who contemplated the relationship between melancholia and exceptional talent. The roots of this enduring question reach back to ancient Greece, where figures like Aristotle and Plato contemplated the enigmatic relationship between melancholia, what we might today recognize as depression, and exceptional talent, pondering whether a predisposition to sadness and introspection was, in fact, a prerequisite for profound creative insight. The concept of divine madness, or mania, was believed to inspire poets and artists, a state of ecstatic frenzy that transcended rational thought, setting the stage for a historical exploration of the interplay between altered mental states and creative expression. However, it wasn't just the Greeks. Other ancient cultures have long observed this relationship. Consider the Roman concept of furor poeticus, or poetical fury, which was thought to be a divine gift that allowed poets to access higher levels of inspiration. These figures weren't merely seen as talented. They were viewed as conduits for divine expression, individuals whose mental states allowed them to tap into something beyond the ordinary human experience. Later, Cesare Lombroso's controversial 19th-century theories, linking genius to degeneracy, shaped societal perceptions of creative individuals. But it is imperative to state that this early understanding, while influential, was often steeped in stigma and misunderstanding. Cesare Lombroso's controversial 19th-century theories took a darker turn, linking genius to degeneracy and suggesting that exceptional creativity was merely a manifestation of underlying mental or physical defects. Although widely discredited today, Lombroso's ideas had a profound impact on societal perceptions, perpetuating the image of the artist as an inherently flawed and unstable individual, a notion that continues to linger in popular imagination. This perspective, while controversial, highlighted a growing fascination with the minds of those who pushed creative boundaries, leading to increased scrutiny and often pathologization of unconventional thinking. It also raises questions about what role society has in labeling those with psychological challenges. But are the challenges faced by creative geniuses merely the cost of doing business? Societies have long been fascinated by the creative output of extraordinary individuals, while often overlooking their potential struggles with mental health. Many artists struggle with mental health challenges and addiction, while they are simultaneously expected to produce more content for the enjoyment of consumers, leading to a romanticized but damaging association of suffering with creative authenticity. The problem of societal exploitation focuses on our tendency to celebrate the art, but disregard the artist's well-being, and this presents a moral quandary that we must explore. Given the complexities of this historical and societal context, how can we reconcile the extraordinary achievements of creative individuals with the potential psychological costs of intense creative obsession? And how can we foster a more supportive environment for those who push the boundaries of human expression? Given these challenges, we must seek out how can we reconcile these challenges. We will delve into Jungian perspectives on creativity and the shadow self, examine historical case studies of artists and scientists who experienced mental health crises, and explore practical strategies for managing the risks associated with creative obsession. By exploring these issues, you'll gain a deeper understanding of the creative process, develop empathy for creative individuals who struggle with mental health challenges, and acquire tools for fostering a more supportive environment for creativity to flourish while safeguarding well-being. So, let's begin our exploration of the psychology of creative obsession, starting with the archetypal roots of the genius-madness link. The creative spirit, often lauded for its brilliance, possesses a darker counterpart, the shadow self. In Jungian psychology, the shadow represents the repressed, undeveloped, or unacceptable aspects of the personality, encompassing those traits and impulses we deem unworthy of conscious recognition. But what happens when this shadow, often lurking beneath the surface, becomes intertwined with the creative process? For highly creative individuals, the shadow can be a particularly potent force, containing both destructive and transformative potential, begging the question, can true genius exist without a dance with darkness? The historical context of artists and madness further illuminates this complex relationship. Throughout history, society has often overlooked or even romanticized the darker aspects of the creative process, perpetuating the stereotype of the tortured artist. From the opium-induced visions of Coleridge to the alcohol-fueled angst of Hemingway, the notion that suffering is a necessary ingredient for artistic genius has become deeply ingrained in our cultural consciousness. However, this romanticization often masks the very real mental health challenges faced by creative individuals, creating a dangerous cycle of exploitation and neglect. But what elements exist within this shadow that can either help or hinder an artist? The shadow can manifest in a multitude of ways in creative individuals, often acting as both a muse and a tormentor. One of the most common manifestations is intense self-doubt and self-criticism, which can drive perfectionism but also lead to crippling anxiety and depression. The artist, driven by an insatiable desire to create something truly exceptional, may become trapped in a cycle of endless revision and self-flagellation, never fully satisfied with their work. Another shadow element is addictive tendencies, often used as a means of self-medication or escape from the relentless pressure to create. Substances like alcohol, drugs, or even work itself can become a refuge from the internal turmoil, providing temporary relief but ultimately exacerbating the underlying psychological distress. Additionally, grandiose fantasies and inflated egos can emerge as a defense against deep-seated feelings of inadequacy. The artist may develop an exaggerated sense of their own importance and talent, using this grandiosity to shield themselves from the fear of failure. Finally, some creative individuals may exhibit Machiavellian-like tendencies, manipulating and controlling others in order to bring their creative vision to life. They might view relationships as transactional, using people as pawns in their quest for artistic perfection. But can these shadow elements be both a source of creative inspiration and a cause of psychological distress? These shadow elements are often amplified by the pressures of fame, success, and societal expectations. The artist, thrust into the spotlight, may find themselves under constant scrutiny, their every move dissected and judged by critics and fans alike. The pressure to maintain a certain image, to constantly innovate, and to live up to the expectations of others can be overwhelming, pushing them further into the depths of their shadow. The constant demand for more content, coupled with the fear of losing relevance, can create a breeding ground for anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges. Fame, rather than being a reward, becomes a burden, exacerbating the very vulnerabilities that fueled their creative fire in the first place. However, these are just theories, unless we see how it plays out in the real world. Vincent van Gogh, Sylvia Plath, and Barbie Fischer. These are just a few of the artists whose lives exemplify the complex interplay between creative genius and the shadow self. Consider Vincent van Gogh, whose struggles with mental illness, including severe depression and psychotic episodes, are well documented. His tumultuous relationships, particularly with his brother Theo and fellow artist Paul Gauguin, were marked by intense emotional outbursts and periods of profound isolation. Yet it was precisely these struggles that informed his unique and powerful artistic vision. As Van Gogh himself wrote in a letter to his brother, "I put my heart and my soul into my work, and have lost my mind in the process." His shadow, with all its darkness and turmoil, became an integral part of his artistic expression, allowing him to capture the raw, unfiltered emotions that define his iconic paintings. Then there's Sylvia Plath, whose battle with depression and obsession with death permeated her confessional poetry. Her work is characterized by a raw and unflinching exploration of the human condition, delving into the darkest corners of the psyche with unflinching honesty. As Plath wrote in The Bell Jar, "I felt very still and empty, the way the eye of a tornado must feel, moving dully along in the middle of the surrounding hullabaloo." Her shadow, fueled by her personal experiences with mental illness and societal pressures, became the driving force behind her poetic voice, giving her the courage to confront taboo subjects and challenge conventional norms. And finally, consider Bobby Fischer, the chess prodigy whose genius was intertwined with paranoid thoughts and extreme behaviors. His brilliance on the chessboard was undeniable, but his personal life was marred by increasingly erratic behavior, anti-Semitic rants, and a descent into isolation. Fischer's paranoia, while undoubtedly damaging to his personal life and career, may have also contributed to his strategic thinking on the chessboard. His ability to anticipate his opponent's moves and to see patterns that others missed could be seen as a manifestation of his heightened awareness, even if that awareness was distorted by paranoia. So how has society contributed to this complicated dynamic? We have seen that artists often struggle with intense internal demons, the dark side of their creative output. But society, often complicit, contributes to the problem. We often romanticize the suffering of artists, perpetuating the myth of the tortured genius and overlooking their very real mental health needs. We readily consume their creative output, whether it be paintings, poems, or musical compositions, without fully acknowledging the potential psychological costs that went into their creation. In essence, we exploit their talent without providing adequate support or resources. This leads to unrealistic expectations and pressures, exacerbating their psychological vulnerabilities. The constant demand for more, coupled with the fear of losing relevance, can create a toxic environment that fuels anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges. This is societal complicity. If society is complicit, what can we do to help without interfering with the creative process? Can we even solve this problem? Society often celebrates the eccentricities of creative individuals, yet this admiration can mask a deeper societal failure, the pathologizing of neurodiversity, which can stifle creative potential before it even has a chance to emerge. But what if the very traits that society deems disordered are in fact integral to the creative process? Neurodiversity, a term coined by sociologist Judy Singer, refers to the natural variation in human brain function and behavioral traits. It challenges the notion that there is one right way of thinking or being, instead embracing the idea that conditions like ADHD, autism, and bipolar disorder are simply different ways of experiencing the world. However, the prevailing medical model of disability often frames these conditions as deficits to be treated or cured, leading to stigma, discrimination, and a loss of self-esteem. This pathologizing can be particularly damaging for creative individuals, whose unique perspectives and unconventional approaches may be dismissed as symptoms of their disorder. Moreover, societal expectations for conformity can further stifle creative expression. The pressure to fit in, to follow the rules, and to adhere to conventional norms can make it difficult for neurodivergent individuals to embrace their unique talents and pursue their passions. This pressure is further compounded by the very real fear of seeking help. Those who fear being labeled or pathologized will not seek help and could descend into mental health struggles that affect their creative output and even their lives. The traditional education system, for instance, often penalizes students who struggle with conventional learning styles, such as those with ADHD who may have difficulty focusing in a structured classroom environment. Corporate environments, too, often reward conformity over innovation, creating barriers for individuals with unconventional thinking styles. This societal complicity, as we discussed in the previous section, often fails to recognize and nurture the unique talents of neurodivergent individuals, inadvertently hindering their creative potential. However, what if the conditions are right for someone to truly embrace their creative side? This brings us to the concept of flow state, a psychological phenomenon that can unlock extraordinary levels of focus and creativity. Flow state, a term coined by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, describes a state of deep immersion, focus, and enjoyment in an activity, where one loses track of time and becomes completely absorbed in the present moment. For creative individuals, flow states can be particularly intense, leading to a sense of timelessness, effortlessness, and complete absorption in their work. In this state, the boundaries between the conscious and unconscious mind can blur, allowing for novel insights, breakthroughs, and a sense of profound connection to the creative process. The artist may feel as though they are simply a conduit for something larger than themselves, a vessel through which inspiration flows freely. However, this intense immersion can also have its downsides. As the individual becomes increasingly engrossed in their work, they may experience a loss of self-awareness and a detachment from reality. Personal needs, such as eating, sleeping, and socializing, may be neglected, leading to exhaustion, burnout, and isolation. The line between passionate dedication and unhealthy obsession can become blurred, as the creative individual sacrifices their well-being for the sake of their art. It is important to distinguish between flow state and the shadow self, though the two can sometimes overlap. While flow state is a state of intense focus and immersion in an activity, the shadow self represents the darker, repressed aspects of the personality. While both can involve a blurring of the boundaries between the conscious and unconscious mind, they differ in their nature and effects. Flow state is generally experienced as positive and energizing, while the shadow self is often associated with negative emotions, destructive impulses, and psychological distress. However, the shadow can inform flow, as an artist can use the state to delve into those dark emotions to create. Is it always healthy to unlock those emotions in this way? Let's look at some real-world examples. Consider the case of a composer who becomes so engrossed in their work that they neglect their relationships, health, and basic needs. They may spend days or even weeks locked away in their studio, obsessively refining their compositions, sacrificing sleep and proper nutrition in the process. As their physical and emotional well-being deteriorates, they may become increasingly irritable, withdrawn, and prone to emotional outbursts. Their relationships with loved ones may suffer as they become more and more isolated, prioritizing their creative pursuits above all else. Ultimately, this relentless pursuit of perfection can lead to a breakdown, leaving them unable to function in society or even to create at all. Or consider a scientist who becomes consumed by their research, pushing themselves to the point of exhaustion and sacrificing their personal life for the sake of discovery. They may spend countless hours in the lab, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desire to make a groundbreaking contribution to their field. As they become more and more immersed in their work, they may lose sight of the bigger picture, neglecting their family, friends, and personal interests. The pressure to succeed can become overwhelming, leading to anxiety, depression, and a sense of profound isolation. The thrill of discovery may be overshadowed by the fear of failure, creating a cycle of self-doubt and self-criticism. Finally, consider an artist who loses themselves so completely in their art that they are unable to function in society. They may become obsessed with a particular theme or style, allowing it to consume their thoughts and actions. Their art may become increasingly disturbing or unsettling, reflecting the darkness and turmoil within their own psyche. As they become more and more detached from reality, they may struggle to maintain relationships, hold down a job, or even take care of their basic needs. Their art, once a source of joy and fulfillment, may become a burden, a constant reminder of their isolation and alienation. These case studies highlight the complex interplay between the conscious and unconscious mind, the shadow self, and the archetype of the divine madman, a figure who embodies both extraordinary genius and profound psychological instability. In Jungian psychology, the divine madman represents the transformative potential of the shadow, the ability to harness one's inner darkness and use it as a source of creative inspiration. However, this archetype also serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us of the potential dangers of unchecked obsession and the importance of maintaining psychological well-being. So, to synthesize the information presented, we see that society's pathologizing of neurodiversity can stifle creative potential. Flow states can be a source of intense creative inspiration, but can also lead to psychological distress. And the shadow self represents the darker, less acceptable aspects of the creative personality, which can be both destructive and transformative. The key takeaway here is that the relationship between creativity and psychological well-being is a complex and nuanced one. While creative obsession can be a powerful catalyst for artistic expression and innovation, it must be approached with awareness, self-compassion, and a commitment to maintaining psychological health. But what if we could harness this in a way that is more manageable? How can we foster a more supportive environment for creative individuals while safeguarding their well-being? The journey continues. Hyperfocus, a superpower or a curse? For creative individuals, the ability to become completely absorbed in their work can be both a blessing and a burden, a gateway to extraordinary achievements and a path to profound isolation. But what happens when the pursuit of creative brilliance comes at the expense of human connection? When the intensity of focus eclipses the ability to empathize with those around us? Hyperfocus, characterized by an intense and sustained concentration on a particular task or activity, can be a potent catalyst for creativity. During these periods of heightened focus, creative individuals may experience a sense of effortless productivity, breakthrough insights, and a profound connection to their work. The external world fades away, and all that remains is the task at hand, the creative vision consuming their entire being. This state of deep immersion can lead to remarkable accomplishments, pushing the boundaries of artistic expression and scientific discovery. However, this intoxicating level of focus can also have a dark side, leading to social isolation, neglect of personal needs, and a detachment from the everyday realities of life. The popular image of the mad genius, romanticized in literature and film, often obscures the very real struggles faced by creative individuals who grapple with the double-edged sword of hyperfocus. Consider the addicting nature of hyperfocus. It's a state that can be hard to break, leading to further isolation from friends and family. We often hear about the 100,000-hour rule, the idea that mastery in any field requires at least 10,000 hours of dedicated practice. But what if excessive focus leads to burnout, a narrowing of perspective, and an inability to see the forest for the trees? While dedication is undoubtedly crucial for creative success, there is a point at which it becomes detrimental, a point where the pursuit of excellence morphs into an unhealthy obsession. The intense focus required to achieve mastery can come at the expense of other important aspects of life, such as relationships, health, and personal well-being. This raises a crucial question. Is the relentless pursuit of creative achievement worth sacrificing the richness and complexity of human experience? But what happens to relationships when one is so dialed in? Creative obsession, while fueling innovation and artistic expression, can also erode empathy and interpersonal connection. The intense focus on one's own creative vision can create a barrier, making it difficult to understand and appreciate the perspectives of others who may not share the same passions. It's as if the creative individual is living in a world of their own making, a world that others cannot fully comprehend or access. This can lead to misunderstandings, conflicts, and a growing sense of distance between the creative individual and those around them. As the creative individual becomes increasingly engrossed in their work, they may become self-absorbed, dismissive of those who do not share their passions or understand their struggles, and impatient with the mundane realities of everyday life. This erosion of empathy can be particularly damaging in close relationships, where understanding, support, and emotional connection are essential. The creative individual may struggle to recognize or respond to the emotional needs of their partner, children, or friends, leading to feelings of loneliness, alienation, and resentment. The demands of their creative work may take precedence over the needs of their loved ones, leading to a sense of neglect and abandonment. How can one maintain a healthy relationship when their partner's attention is always elsewhere, lost in the labyrinth of their own creative mind? Further complicating matters is the concept of emotional labor, the often unacknowledged work of managing and responding to the emotions of others. Creative individuals, particularly those deeply immersed in their work, may be less willing or able to engage in emotional labor, further straining their relationships. They may see it as a distraction from their creative pursuits, an unwelcome intrusion into their carefully constructed world. This is where the dark triad traits come into play, particularly Machiavellianism and narcissism. An individual high in Machiavellianism may manipulate or exploit those around them to further their creative goals, viewing relationships as transactional rather than reciprocal. The needs and feelings of others become secondary to the pursuit of artistic or scientific success. Narcissism, characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance and a need for admiration, can also contribute to the erosion of empathy. The creative individual may see themselves as superior to others, entitled to special treatment, and deserving of constant praise and attention. This sense of entitlement can lead to a disregard for the feelings of others, a lack of accountability, and a willingness to exploit relationships for personal gain. However, let's look at some instances where we've seen this play out in the real world. Consider the case of Stanley Kubrick, the visionary director known for his meticulous attention to detail and his demanding approach to filmmaking. Accounts from those who worked with Kubrick often paint a picture of a tyrannical figure, a perfectionist who would stop at nothing to achieve his artistic vision. Actors and crew members were often subjected to grueling hours, repeated takes, and relentless criticism. This relentless pursuit of perfection came at a cost, alienating many of those around him and sacrificing personal relationships for the sake of his art. As one former collaborator remarked, working with Stanley was like being in a cult. He demanded absolute loyalty and obedience, and he was not afraid to break you down to get what he wanted. Or consider the example of the reclusive novelist who isolates themselves for months at a time, retreating to a remote cabin or a secluded apartment to work on their latest book. During these periods of intense focus, they may neglect their family and friends, ignoring phone calls, missing social events, and becoming increasingly withdrawn. Their loved ones may feel abandoned, confused, and resentful, struggling to understand the writer's need for isolation. As one novelist's spouse lamented, "It's like living with a ghost." They're physically present, but emotionally absent, lost in the world of their own creation. Ultimately, this pattern of isolation and neglect can lead to divorce, broken friendships, and a deep sense of loneliness. Then there's the composer Richard Wagner, a genius of music, but also a notorious exploiter of those around him. Wagner's narcissism was legendary. He saw himself as a figure of immense importance, deserving of endless support and adoration. His anti-Semitic views alienated many, and he frequently manipulated friends and patrons to finance his extravagant lifestyle and artistic endeavors. He shamelessly borrowed money, engaged in affairs, and seemed to feel little remorse for the suffering he caused others. As he once wrote in a letter, "I must have pleasure and amusement, and can't put up with gérer le care or your existence any longer. Oh God, what a miserable creature I am." All these behaviors suggest that Wagner was unconcerned about the well-being of those around him, prioritizing his creative output above all else. He embodies a dark side of creative genius, where personal relationships and ethical considerations are sacrificed at the altar of artistic ambition. These case studies reveal a recurring pattern. The creative individual, driven by an insatiable desire to create, becomes increasingly detached from the world around them, sacrificing relationships, neglecting personal needs, and ultimately paying a heavy price for their obsession. The pursuit of creative brilliance, while admirable in its own right, can become a destructive force, leaving a trail of broken hearts and shattered lives in its wake. So what can we do about it? Is it even possible to live a normal life when in the grips of creative obsession? In essence, we have seen that hyperfocus can both create and destroy, that the intensity required for creative genius can erode the empathy needed to sustain relationships, and that the very traits that drive innovation can also lead to isolation and personal suffering. The paradox of creative obsession lies in its ability to elevate us to extraordinary heights while simultaneously threatening to tear us apart. Thus, true creative genius involves not just innate talent or relentless dedication, but also the ability to manage and channel the intense psychological forces at play. This is a subtle distinction, but one of supreme importance. It begs the question, what about creative self-care, the conscious effort to cultivate well-being and maintain healthy relationships amidst the demands of a creative life? But what does that look like? The creative fire, a gift or a curse? While it can ignite innovation and artistic expression, it can also consume the individual, leading to burnout and despair. The first step in managing this powerful force is acknowledging its presence, recognizing that this intense drive requires careful handling, lest it spiral out of control. How can one effectively harness the energy of creative obsession without sacrificing their well-being? Self-awareness is paramount, a constant monitoring of one's mental and emotional state. It involves paying close attention to the early warning signs of imbalance, the neglect of personal needs, the increasing isolation from friends and family, the creeping sense of anxiety or depression. These are not signs of weakness, but rather signals that the creative fire is burning too hot, demanding immediate attention and adjustment. Avoiding self-judgment is also important. It's easy to fall into the trap of criticizing oneself for being too obsessed or not productive enough, but such negativity only adds fuel to the fire. Self-compassion, on the other hand, provides a buffer against the destructive potential of perfectionism. It allows one to acknowledge their struggles, forgive their shortcomings, and approach their creative pursuits with greater kindness and understanding. One practical approach is to conduct creative audits on a regular basis. These audits are essentially self-assessments designed to evaluate the balance between creative output, overall well-being, and personal relationships. Ask yourself, am I neglecting my physical health? Are my relationships suffering? Am I experiencing excessive stress or anxiety? Am I still finding joy in my creative work? These questions serve as a compass, guiding one back to a path of equilibrium. A creative audit might reveal that one is spending too much time working and not enough time socializing, or that one's diet consists primarily of caffeine and processed foods. The goal is not to achieve perfect balance, but rather to identify areas where adjustments are needed. Once one has accepted the presence of a strong creative drive, the question becomes, how do we stay in control? Finding harmony amidst creative obsession requires a delicate balancing act, a constant negotiation between the demands of one's work and the needs of one's well-being. It's about learning to prioritize, to set boundaries, and to cultivate habits that support both creative expression and psychological health. What specific techniques can one employ to achieve this elusive balance? Time management is crucial. Setting realistic goals, prioritizing tasks, and scheduling regular breaks are all essential strategies for preventing burnout. The Pomodoro technique, for example, involves working in focused 25-minute intervals, followed by a 5-minute break. This simple technique can help to maintain concentration, prevent mental fatigue, and create a sense of accomplishment. Similarly, blocking out specific times for creative work, rather than trying to squeeze it in whenever possible, can help to establish a routine and protect one's time and energy. But it's not enough. Mindfulness and meditation practices offer another powerful tool for cultivating self-awareness, managing stress, and fostering emotional regulation. These practices involve training the mind to focus on the present moment, observing thoughts and feelings without judgment. Guided meditations, in particular, can be helpful for beginners. Apps like Headspace and Calm offer a wide variety of guided meditations designed to reduce stress, improve sleep, and cultivate compassion. By incorporating mindfulness into one's daily routine, one can learn to recognize the early warning signs of imbalance and take corrective action before they escalate. Physical activity, healthy eating habits, and sufficient sleep are also essential for supporting overall well-being and preventing burnout. Exercise, even in small doses, can have a profound impact on mood, energy levels, and cognitive function. Yoga and Tai Chi are particularly beneficial as they combine physical movement with mindfulness and relaxation. Similarly, a balanced diet that includes plenty of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains can provide the body with the nutrients it needs to function optimally. And of course, getting enough sleep is crucial for cognitive performance, emotional regulation, and overall health. Aim for at least 7-8 hours of sleep per night and create a relaxing bedtime routine to promote restful sleep. However, what about our connection to other humans? Maintaining healthy relationships and social connections is paramount, even when deeply immersed in creative work. Communicating one's needs and boundaries to loved ones is essential for fostering understanding and support. Prioritizing quality time with family and friends, even if it's just for a few hours each week, can help to maintain those vital connections. But these all sound good on paper, but how have others made them work? Consider the case of the writer Haruki Murakami, known for his disciplined routine of writing, running, and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Murakami famously wakes up early, writes for several hours, runs or swims, reads, listens to music, and goes to bed early. This rigorous routine allows him to maintain a high level of productivity without sacrificing his well-being. As Murakami himself has said, the repetition itself becomes the important thing. It's a form of mesmerism. I mesmerize myself to reach a deeper state. His commitment to physical and mental well-being is an integral part of his creative process, not an afterthought. Then there's the musician Esperanza Spalding, who sets strict boundaries between her work and personal life, ensuring that she has dedicated time for family, friends, and hobbies. She actively carves out time for activities unrelated to music, such as reading, spending time in nature, and connecting with loved ones. This allows her to recharge, gain new perspectives, and avoid becoming completely consumed by her creative work. Spalding has emphasized the importance of saying no to projects that don't align with her values or that would compromise her well-being. Or consider the scientist Jennifer Doudna, a biochemist known for her collaborative approach to research. Doudna emphasizes the importance of teamwork and delegation, recognizing that she doesn't have to do everything herself. She relies on her team to share the workload, provide different perspectives, and offer support. She fosters a collaborative environment where everyone feels valued and empowered. Her ability to build and lead a successful team allows her to maintain a healthy work-life balance and avoid burnout. But there are limits to this method. What is the most important thing we can take away from these examples? It's this: simply adopting the habits of successful creatives isn't enough if underlying psychological issues are not addressed. Implementing a strict routine, practicing mindfulness, or setting boundaries may prove ineffective if one is struggling with unresolved trauma, personality disorders, or other mental health challenges. In such cases, professional help is essential. Therapy can provide a safe space to explore these deeper issues, develop coping mechanisms, and cultivate greater self-awareness. Furthermore, some individuals may benefit from medication to manage symptoms of anxiety, depression, or other mental health conditions. The key is to recognize that creative self-care is not a one-size-fits-all solution, but rather a personalized process that may require professional guidance. In essence, managing creative obsession requires a multifaceted approach that encompasses self-awareness, time management, mindfulness, physical activity, and healthy relationships. These strategies are not merely lifestyle choices, but rather essential tools for navigating the complex psychological landscape of the creative mind. Ongoing self-assessment and adaptation are crucial, recognizing that the journey towards balance is a continuous process, not a destination. But even with all this, how can we foster a more supportive environment for creative individuals while safeguarding their well-being? Creative obsession can be a powerful catalyst for innovation and artistic expression, but it must be approached with awareness, self-compassion, and a commitment to psychological well-being. The creative fire can illuminate the world, but it must be carefully tended, lest it consume everything in its path. So what does this mean for the world at large? In conclusion, after this journey through the highs and lows of creative obsession, we've seen how it manifests as an intricate dance between the conscious and unconscious mind, how it is shaped by societal pressures that range from exploitation to romanticization, and how it is inextricably linked with neurodiversity. We have considered the allure of the flow state, the isolating effects of hyperfocus on relationships, and the imperative of managing this powerful force through self-awareness and self-compassion. The patterns we observe, the isolated genius, the creative cycle, the blurred boundaries, and even the presence of dark triad traits are not isolated phenomena, but rather interwoven threads in the complex tapestry of the creative experience. We began by questioning the fine line between genius and madness, a paradox that has haunted artists and scientists for centuries. Have we fully answered that question? Perhaps not. But what we have gained is a deeper understanding of what it means to be driven, to be consumed by a creative fire that can both illuminate and incinerate. The revelations along the way have been sobering. Has our exploration reinforced the notion that society often exploits the creative output of individuals without adequately addressing their mental health needs? Regrettably, yes. From the struggling artist whose work becomes posthumously famous to the brilliant scientist whose breakthroughs overshadow their personal struggles, the pattern is undeniable. The world eagerly consumes the fruits of creative labor, often turning a blind eye to the sacrifices and struggles that lie behind them. Ultimately, true creative freedom comes not from escaping limitations, but from embracing them responsibly and leaning on one another for support. It is in acknowledging the shadow, in navigating the creative cycle, in honoring the boundaries between the conscious and unconscious, and in tempering the darker aspects of the self that we truly unlock our creative potential. The creative spirit is a flame that can illuminate the world, but it must be tended with care and compassion, lest it consume the artist and those around them. Which path will you choose? Therefore, let us strive to foster a more supportive environment for creative individuals in our own communities and lives. Perhaps this begins with challenging the romanticized notion of the tortured artist, recognizing that mental health struggles are not a prerequisite for genius. Perhaps it means advocating for better access to mental health resources for artists and creative professionals, ensuring that they have the support they need to thrive. And perhaps it means simply offering a listening ear, a word of encouragement, or a helping hand to a creative individual who is struggling. I urge you to seek out, and support organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, or the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSB, which provide resources and support for individuals struggling with mental health challenges. By embracing these ideas, by prioritizing well-being alongside creative expression, we can move towards a future where creativity is celebrated and supported in a sustainable and compassionate way. A future where the flame of creative genius illuminates the world without consuming the artist. That concludes our exploration.